ISIS still are around. Supporters are still there. They're still carrying out attacks from time to time. They're also there because of the threat of Iran and to monitor and restrict, to some extent, Iranian activity in that region. And that's why they come under attack from these pro-Iran militias. But yes, ISIS is still there, and they have apparently resurged somewhat since the start of this war.
Now, an American general says attacks by Iran-backed militias is helping ISIS. We're joined now by Richard Spencer, the Times correspondent in Tel Aviv. Good morning to you, Richard.
Good morning.
ISIS, Islamic State, we haven't mentioned them in some time, but that's what the American troops in Jordan, Iraq and Syria are apparently focused on.
Well, it's only what they're notionally there for. The reason for the American and small British presence in Iraq and Syria is it's a result of that intervention back in 2014, which lasted for 5 years. The war on ISIS and the some small number of troops, a couple of thousand Americans, a very small handful of British troops and French troops have stayed in Iraq and Syria, in theory, to carry on trying to prevent an ISIS resurgence, and that is a very real goal. ISIS still are around. Supporters are still there. They're still carrying out attacks from time to time. They're also there because of the threat of Iran and to monitor and restrict, to some extent, Iranian activity in that region. And that's why they come under attack from these pro-Iran militias. But yes, ISIS is still there, and they have apparently resurged somewhat since the start of this war, and since particularly the US troops have been distracted by more attacks from these pro-Iran militias.
Now, so far there haven't been any American attacks on the Iranian militias, but Israel has sent missiles into Syria.
Well, there have been attacks previous to this incident on Sunday. I mean, there's been tit-for-tat exchanges going on so rather quietly since October the 7th. I mean, that's been going on actually for several years now. But the rate of attacks by these pro-Iran militias increased quite a lot after October the 7th. Rockets, drones hitting American bases in Syria and Iraq, and America has hit back. There was a couple of airstrikes in Syria at the end of November, when I think 8 or 9 of these fighters, Iraqi mainly, fighters for these pro-Iran militias, were killed. There was another strike in Iraq in the end of December. So this has been going on for some time. There's what's different in this particular occasion is firstly that the Iranian people, the Iranian side, got lucky, if you like, and managed to get a drone through and actually kill 3 American servicemen. I don't think they were expecting that. Actually, I think that caught them by surprise. And secondly, it took place in Jordan, which is a country which has largely been left out of these exchanges in the past.
Let's talk about what is going on in the Israel-Gaza conflict. And obviously, everything is connected. A ceasefire in Gaza could change things. It did feel in the last week or so that there were new and louder voices calling for that. We know that Qatar has said that they feel that there is some progress being made in terms of releasing more hostages. What is your feeling about the progress of those two issues?
Yeah, I personally am a pessimist on this one. I don't think there can be any breakthrough in terms of a ceasefire or hostage exchanges, hostage for prisoners, unless there is a political change in Israel itself, which is possible, but I don't think is imminent. I think both sides are trying to show the world that they are interested in a ceasefire, but the two sides have red lines that are very very far apart. I mean, Israel will not accept, it says, an end to the war so long as Hamas are still there, so long as the Hamas leadership is still underground and free to come out again and rebuild its military force if there's an end to the fighting. And Hamas says there won't be any form of ceasefire that isn't permanent. So Hamas is not going to have a temporary ceasefire, hand over all its hostages, and then agree for Israel to start attacking it again. That's not what Hamas been fairly clear about that.
I wanted to ask you about UNRWA, the organisation responsible for Palestinian refugees. They're in some deep trouble, really, because there were allegations that some of their employees had some ties or some involvement, not just with Hamas, but with the attacks of October the 7th. Now, 10 countries have pulled funding. UNRWA are now saying they can only really keep going till February because of that. Has there been any update about what the level of involvement might have been of anyone working for UNRWA when it comes to Hamas or October the 7th?
Yeah, so one or two details have leaked out in America, which was briefed on this by Israel. The claim is that there were 12 UNRWA employees, 7 of them teachers, others were clerical worker, a storeroom manager, people like that. 12 employees actually took part in the events of October the 7th. The Israelis say they traced the phones of 6 of them to Israel, so they were part of the attacking force, if you like, that actually entered Israel. The other 6, they have phone intercepts in which they talk about their role. One of them was involved in a kidnap of someone. Someone else was providing weapons. Someone else was storing weapons for Hamas. That's 12 people they have 13,000 employees in Gaza. They provide almost, just under half the schools in Gaza. They provide clinics, doctors, and other services, health-related services, social services. So they have 13,000 employees. So 12 is not a very large number in that circumstance. What Israel really don't like is that the UNRWA, which is supposed to be a UN body, is also a Palestinian body. It's in two senses. One is it's obviously operates in Palestinian refugee camps, not just in Gaza, but across the Middle East, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in Syria. It provides these same services in those camps. And so most of its employees are Palestinian. And of course, if they're Palestinian, there's going to be a fair number of those that support Hamas and other militant groups. The Israelis estimate that 10%, I think, was a figure I heard, of UNRWA employees in Gaza are affiliated to UNRWA, affiliated to Hamas in some ways. So they don't like that, and they also don't like the fact that the existence of UNRWA is fundamentally tied to a Palestinian narrative. The idea is that Palestinians, wherever they are, whether they're in Lebanon or Syria or in Gaza and the West Bank, the refugee community, these it is specifically there to serve people who were forced out of their homes in Israel in 1948 and their descendants. So by treating these people as a separate community, the Israelis say that they are fundamentally promoting the idea that these hundreds of thousands of Palestinians will at some point be allowed to return to Israel, are not settled people in their current communities, will be allowed to return to Israel, which they say would effectively mean an end to the state of Israel, because Israel is not that anymore.
Yes. Richard, thank you very much for that. That's Richard Spencer, the Times correspondent in Tel Aviv.